Hi, everyone.
Hello, Jean Brown. Hello, Ginny
Hello.
Brown.
Hello.
All right. So it's Seek Week night number 4. Thursday night. Here we are, our penultimate live stream for the week. Yeah, it's been fun.
Are you throwing around vocabulary words for us tonight?
Yeah.
Penultimate, like that's beautiful.
Penultimate. It's the second to last.
We love it. Does that mean tomorrow, like it's our ultimate live stream?
It is the ultimate. That's right. Yeah.
Gosh, managing those expectations, Jean. Come on.
I know. So let's see. Monday night, it was the three of us, and we talked about kind of a look back at the year and what we accomplished over the course of the year, kind of the big things, especially the legislation. That was a big one. We talked about that for a while. And then Tuesday night, we had Self-Help Geek Off. That was a good time. Dr. Doyle and Dr. Christine Whelan, our resident self-help geeks. And then they were back last night for our Ask the Docs session, which was also excellent. Always a good time with both of you.
Every time Christine and I talk is the Self-Help Geek Off. Just last night we happened to have it. Tuesday night we happened to record it.
Yeah.
But every time we talk, it's the Self-Help Geek Off.
Exactly. So on Tuesday, actually, it was October 8th. We didn't talk about this on Tuesday night, but Tuesday was October 8th, which is the anniversary of the Sedona sweat lodge that caused the death of 3 people, including our family member, Kirby Brown, my sister, Jenny's daughter. Yeah, so actually this is the 15-year anniversary, which is kind of crazy. And I think as these things go, in some ways it feels like it's been longer than that, and in other ways it feels like it was just yesterday, right? So yeah, tonight our topic for the evening is the enduring legacy of Sedona. We always try as an organization to make it clear that while our mission is rooted and our origins are rooted in that event, we see our mission and our purpose as much larger than that. Because the point, of course, is that when it happened, we realized that it wasn't an isolated incident. It was just, kind of the worst outcome of many bad outcomes that seem to happen with people, in moving through the self-help industry. And so, we always try to emphasize that we are much bigger than Sedona, but nevertheless, it stays with us, and it's still the kind of, in many ways, it's a very helpful example of what and how things can go wrong in the self-help industry. And so we end up kind of referring back to it a lot just because it does stand out as a good example. But yeah, so thoughts on 15 years and what that's been all about.
So for me, really the 9th is a more difficult day even than the 8th, because the 9th at 8:15 that morning is when the troopers came to our door to tell us that Kirby had died. So every year I kind of relive that. So yeah, 15 years is an amazing thing. In preparation for tonight, I thought, what exactly is the definition of legacy? What is that like? It's such a big word. Like, what is it mean? But it means something very simple. It means something that is passed on or left to others. That's really the official definition. And that caused me to go to our book, Jean, to look at the final chapters in the book to really talk about, what the enduring legacy is. Jean and I wrote the book in 2000. Well, we started writing it in 2018, 19, 20.
Yeah, I think 2018 was probably when we really started it.
We published in
2020
during the pandemic, and then we recorded the audio version in 21. So when we talk about legacy, I think this book is a great example of understanding our legacy. But one of the things that I was reading about that I had written was that I know that I feel consciously driven to bring Kirby into the world. So even though Seek is bigger than our story, I do want the world to know her because she's not here.
Mm-hmm.
I want the world to know that this amazing person is not here because of a very bad situation, because of a bad self-help practitioner, someone who had corrupted himself. And also the striving to try to bring some kind of right to a wrong. These were three beautiful, amazing people who lost their lives in a ridiculously stupid way that never should have happened and easily could have been prevented. And I think there's this compelling sense that to create some sort of meaning from something that was so egregious that never should have happened. So let's take something positive. Can we turn this into something positive, which is, can we tell this story so that people will be more cautious? And when we created the organization, it was to help seekers be possibly more discerning and more cautious, but also to educate the public in general about the kinds of things that go on in this unregulated industry, and then to do whatever we could to make the industry more ethical and safe so that when people are seeking, they're going to have a positive experience. That's why you go. You don't go to have a negative experience. You don't go to lose all your money. You don't go to have mental health challenges as a result of a guru. But we know those are the kinds of things that happen the more we learned about this. So that concept of legacy is, that's what we've wanted to bring into the world. When we did our 2016 retreat and we made our short-term goals and our long-term goals for our organization, the long-term goals were really about letting people know what's going on in this industry and helping to make it safer, and at the same time give people tools and information to be more aware themselves, to keep themselves safe as well.
Exactly. And actually, on that note, that final note of empowering the seekers, that's what we're going to be talking about tomorrow night. Just as a little teaser, we have we've created a number of different tools over the years, and I think in many ways the things that we've created speak directly to the tenets of our mission, which is something that we talked about on Monday night as well. And I see our mission as being, kind of three parts. It's focused at consumer education and protection. It's focused at improving the industry, and it's focused on creating some kind of legislation, because this industry is so weirdly unregulated given how big it is and how impactful it is. And we've really done that. Like we created our red flags. So on our website, you can see in the consumer tab, it's red flags, whether you're reading a book or going to an event or consuming something online. And then we have the Seek Safely Promise, which is aimed at self-help practitioners. And then, as we discussed on Monday, we have our legislation, which finally passed, one part of the New York State legislature this past year, and we're hoping next year it can actually pass the second half and then maybe be signed into law. So we really have managed to hit all of those points. And then we continue, of course. I think we've always felt that maybe the consumer education was one of the goal that we could work on in a very constant way. We can constantly be giving people information. So now, of course, we also have our podcast. And then this tool that we are going to share tomorrow night is all about helping a consumer who is planning to walk into a self-help situation, empower themselves as a protective measure. So yeah, I agree. I think, in many ways, the legacy of Sedona is all of these things that we have created in Seek that, although it's been challenging, I do feel very proud of all of those things that we've done.
Oh, you bet. Something that occurs to me is that, James Arthur Ray, back before he blocked me, and we would kind of get into it on social media. He would always fling at me the accusation that you're talking about ancient history. Like, is that all you have? Like you're talking about something that doesn't matter anymore because it happened so long ago and I've paid my dues. Like he would say this about his prison sentence, right? I've paid my dues and can't we just move past that? And what occurs to me about that is, I mean, you guys know that as a therapist, I specialize in trauma work, and trauma survivors are very often hit with a version of that. That's ancient history. Like, why can't you just leave that in the past? Come on, like move on, move forward. And kind of one of the first things that so many trauma survivors need to do in the early stages of recovery is kind of, embrace this fact that, man, even if what I'm reacting to with my symptoms and my struggles, like even if that happened in the past, if there's no meaningful resolution, like if there's no meaning making out of that, if I don't have the safety and the support and the resources to make meaning out of that, the past is going to stay with me. It doesn't actually matter how much time passes. And I think about that in regards to Sedona a lot. The fact that James himself has tried to make meaning out of it. The meaning he decided to make out of it was, on the one hand, a narrative where this is something that happened to him. Poor guy. He lost his business, guys. Poor guy. He lost his liberty for about 5 minutes. It's terrible on him. So he says. But the other meaning that he made out of it was, of course, a marketing opportunity, where he was going to write another book and kind of make this part of his public persona. But I think it's important to talk about the legacy of Sedona and to still talk about Sedona. One, because not a whole lot has changed in the industry. In fact, you might make the argument that the conditions that made Sedona possible have been put into overdrive with the social mediaification of the self-help industry, right? Like previously, to get access to certain experiences and gurus, you had to be involved in their ecosystem and go to live events. Now you've got all these things happening on social media and Instagram, these kinds of things. So the conditions haven't changed all that much. Like, it's still very possible for something like Sedona to happen. And by the way, things like Sedona do happen. We don't hear about them a whole lot. Like, we hear about kind of the top, the most dramatic instances of these things. Like, we heard about Sedona because people died, and also because James Arthur Ray was an Oprah guy, right? We heard about Keith Raniere and Nexium because that was on the front page of the New York Times, right? Situations that, like Sedona, again, that maybe did not involve death, happen all the time in this industry. So I think it remains important to talk about Sedona, not just in the context of Sedona itself, but in the context of, man, what gave rise to those conditions is still a thing in the industry and still needs to be addressed. Like, Seek Safely needs to continue to exist, right? And will need to continue it. Like, even if the legislation passes, goes into law, like that wasn't kind of that's not the end goal. Like, the end goal is the continual support of the self-help community and trying to make changes in the self-help industry.
That's right. And I think it's also important to remember that when we talk about the legacy of that event, you have part of the legacy of that event are three beautiful, now young adult children of James Shore.
You bet.
Of Liz Newman's family, her two brothers left without their mother. What is the legacy and the impact of that in their life? I was reminded of that this morning because I'm cleaning out our basement and I come across all of Kirby's painting supplies from Sedona because from when she lived in the Baja, because she did professional painting. So she had like some really cool tools, and here in a box, I'm unpacking that and I'm going, well, this is kind of amazing, that the people who are gone continually show up in our life and reignite that sense of a shattered heart and emptiness. And at the same time, the joy of memories that you have, and wanting to live in her spirit. I think these three people were amazing people. When you hear their individual stories and what brought them there, living in the spirit of the person becomes also the legacy of a death, and that's true for every death. In families, with friendships, whatever, that, living the spirit of the person becomes really important for those who are left behind to embrace.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And, one of the things that I find also kind of drives me forward as we do this work, and that kind of also like really drove me a bit right at the beginning as well, is yes, the three people who died at that event were three incredible people. As I have met more people who would consider themselves seekers, so like when I, interact with people who reach out to us, when I go to the cult conference and meet all the people there, as we've connected with various people, who have been on our podcast or supported us in various ways because they feel passionate about this industry. They're all amazing people too.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And so when I think of what I can do to kind of keep Kirby's spirit in the world, I think of how I feel Kirby's spirit in so many of the people that I have met. And so I feel compelled to want to help empower them and help protect them as well. Kirby died, and it sucked, and it shouldn't have happened, and I miss her every day. But I know that there are other people out there who kind of hold some of her spirit, and it makes me feel better knowing that they're still out there.
Mm-hmm.
There is a specific aspect of the legacy of Sedona that I think we need to talk about, and we need to have a larger conversation than just this live stream about, insofar as there's something that hasn't changed. Like we've mentioned, the reason why a subset of the folks who were at Sedona were there had even heard of James Arthur Ray was because of the publicity from having been on Oprah.
Mm-hmm.
Oprah, going on Oprah has kind of it's a hello. Want to be part of this conversation? Going on Oprah has kind of been the way that a lot of self-help celebrities kind of broke into the mainstream, and I think it's inarguable that that at least a subset of people, probably Kirby, wouldn't have been at Sedona had that not happened. After Sedona happened, your family, really asked Oprah publicly. In fact, Jean, you wrote an open letter to Oprah, asking for some kind of acknowledgement of her role, the role of her influence, and that in facilitating that happening. And it wasn't even that you were looking for like an apology, even necessarily, like just some kind of acknowledgement that, well, sure, like a lot of these things had to happen in order for this to happen, and never got that acknowledgement from Oprah. I was thinking about this relatively recently, a couple of years ago, when the documentary about Michael Jackson hit HBO, and it featured two survivors of abuse, and just a harrowing documentary series, and it was really, really, really rough, especially for survivors of sexual violence. And after the docuseries aired, like Oprah did a thing about it. Like Oprah had the survivors on and was asking them questions and whatnot. And I was watching this thinking, man, she's talking to these survivors as if she knows what she's talking about, and really kind of getting into very difficult things that they're on stage in front of an audience. And as somebody who works with survivors a lot, I'm cringing. I'm like, oh, wow. Because I'm watching one of the survivors is clearly not doing well in this interview. And yet it continued to happen. And it just occurred to me that, man, like even years later, after multiple things with people that she endorsed or had on the show, still kind of hasn't learned her lesson. And the point is not really to knock Oprah. The point is that we live in this kind of culture, in this media environment, where trauma is kind of played for clicks and publicity. And that's an aspect of Sedona that I really wish, again, James Arthur Ray did not act alone, is what I'm saying. And I really, really wish that that more, we could have a broader cultural conversation about how media and celebrity kind of plays into what made Sedona possible.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and now it's almost even more relevant. Like Oprah was like the original influencer in the wellness,
Oprah and Phil Donahue, you bet,
self-help kind of space.
You bet.
And now, like much of our marketing culture is built on influencer marketing. So all of social media is influencer marketing. And so you have so many people out there. Like I laugh, our friend Mallory DeMille, she's so good at pointing these people out, because she's always just like, just wait for it. Whenever you see one of these wellness bros or like these wellness people, just wait for them to mention the, supplement that they're pushing. Like it's going to come, it's going to be there. And we follow these people as if they're something genuine and authentic, but it's all just marketing. And there's so much of it. It's like so pervasive, and a lot of it is sneaky, because you feel like, as opposed to, a big production like Oprah in a studio on a lot, instead you're in somebody's living room or in their bathroom with them. So it feels more real and genuine, but it's just the same old shit, really. And we all need to be aware of that. So, yeah.
In the case of Parasite Cleanse, is literally the same old shit, quite literally. I as an influencer, I often say, like, I'm the worst. Some people call me like I'm the worst influencer because I don't have anything to sell.
Yeah.
Like
well,
you're not making any money.
I was just going to say that, Glenn. I mean, that part of the problem is people have a right to. They have, as you guys have said so many times, a thirst to grow and to learn and to be more. And that's a great, wonderful human instinct. It's, needs to be encouraged and explored, and people need to do that. But follow the money, the things that people do in order to take advantage of that impulse and that urge to grow and to be more, so that they make more money. It's huge. And it's something we've struggled with as an organization too. We've always been very small, because I don't want to get pulled into that ecosphere of big money. But yet we still, this is the fundraising week. We do need money in order to operate, And it would really be nice to have a staff. We would be able to actually do more work instead of having just occasional volunteer hours, So, but the whole money thing creates a problem, and it creates a bit of a problem for us because I know we often feel kind of like a little cringy because this self-help world is so permeated with charlatans who are just looking to grab people's money. And there's many good teachers out there too, but they're separating the wheat from the weeds is hard.
You bet.
Sometimes it's very hard.
You bet. And that's the thing too, like when we talk about the legacy of Sedona, I think part of the legacy of Sedona is the legacy of events like Sedona. Things like, so on my live stream, the after party live stream on my page last night, I told the whole story. And people who didn't know about it were appalled. You should see the comments, like, oh my God. And we directed folks to Matt Stroud's wonderful article about the wonderful and terrible article, The Death Dealer, that really did kind of a deep dive into what happened at Sedona. But, and of course, Connie Joy's book, Tragedy in Sedona, which laid out like a description of what happened. But so Sedona was the spiritual warrior retreat was an event of a certain type that you see. I don't know if you see a lot of them, but you definitely see them in the personal empowerment world. The reason you don't see a lot of them is because it was very expensive. And really kind of intensive. You had to head on out to the desert and you had to devote a week of your life to it, essentially. And not everybody can do that, either financially or time wise. And it was an event that, again, I encourage everybody to either listen to the Guru podcast from Wondery, where Jenny and I are both on that podcast, but it has a lot of descriptions of what actually took place at Spiritual Warrior. It was an event that was heavy on the physical challenges. Like there was an overnight vision quest out in the desert. You couldn't even take a blanket with you. You could pay extra and get a parka, but you were there like overnight, and there are all these just really draining, high risk, as it turns out, physical challenges. Very little sleep. In fact, James is on record instructing his folks. He says, boy, you can sleep, but I wouldn't recommend it. Like you've only got a week here, and etc.
Oh, he would always say sleep is overrated.
Sleep is overrated. Sleep when you're dead.
Sleep when you're dead.
Really interesting. Really interesting.
You bet. So the point is that, I think that what happened at Sedona absolutely has implications for these types of events, because on the one hand, it just laid bare how risky some of these things are, especially when you're working with somebody who has virtually no respect for and virtually no training in the kinds of things that he's offering to and leading. So they're always going to be risky, but I think they're always going to happen because they're enormously lucrative and they're enormously attractive to a subset of folks who are. Again, the irony is they tend to be highly motivated. They actually tend to be pretty successful in life because you had to be able to go to pay for it. Right. I remember Julie Bin, one of the Sedona survivors, was talking about what drew her to the experience. And she was she is like a super successful person, just in her life. And she's like, man, I'd done all these events but I couldn't quite get there, but maybe this would be the one. Maybe this, again, it's heartbreaking because highly motivated and really well-intentioned and smart and successful. There's always going to be a market for events like this because there are always going to be seekers like this. Right.
Well, there's always going to be a market for the promise that you just have to learn this next thing, and then everything will work out for you. I mean, you guys were talking about that in last night's program, that desire, and I liked your comment last night, Glenn, about it isn't just a quick fix. It's a sure fix.
You bet.
And when it's advertised, when it's talked about with authority, and this is what you need to do. So what we're seeing now is beyond events. It's also the kind of I don't know, almost like a brainwashing, mind control that's happening with coaching and insight seminars and things that people are doing online, where, this conviction that I just have to follow this person's thought and what they're doing and what they're teaching me, and then my life is really going to be where I want it to be. I will be the person I really want it to be. So it's not just the event; it's the thinking and the teaching at the event that becomes important, because that teaching is happening in a lot of different ways.
Oh, you bet. It's very reminiscent of. I was recently rewatching The Vow, the HBO series The Vow, about Nexium, with our friends Sarah Edmondson and Mark Vicente and Nippy Ames, among others. And when Sarah Edmondson talks about what drew her into kind of that inner circle DOS, the cult within a cult. What really made the difference was she felt stalled in her professional development within the organization. And Lauren Salzman, who was her close friend, said, "Hey, I've got the thing that can push you over the edge, that push over the finish line. Like I've got the thing, but and again, it's always a there's this one thing you're missing. If you do just this, I know this sounds kind of intense, and it's kind of like going out to the desert for a week, right? Like, it sounds kind of intense, but this is the thing." And seekers, and again, I'm a self-help person. I get it. Like, there's part of me that's like, hell yeah, man. Like, I will totally do that extra super intense thing. So there's always going to be a market for it. That's one of the reasons why we keep talking about this. Is, again, it's not to stay stuck in the past. It's because, again, the flaws in this model really need to be publicized and understood and not forgotten about. If James had his way, we would all forget about it. He would love that. Are you kidding me? He and a lot of other teachers would love that.
So, when we talk about legacy, I think one of the things that has happened over 15 years, I mean, we began this organization pretty quickly after Kirby's death. So by 2010, we had bylaws, and we were putting an organization in place, and started having regular meetings and created a board, and have been involved in various initiatives for the last 14 years. So the thing that's happened more recently, and I think the podcast has been a tremendous tool for this, is we're reaching people in the industry way beyond anyone who knows us personally. And, as we've said, the goal is to get beyond the origin story and to really say, let's look at this industry. Let's look at what's going on. Let's pay attention to what you're doing, so that what you're doing is going to really be productive and safe, and not something that's going to harm you or scam you. And I think the contacts that we have made in these last couple of years have been really important. So more recently, we've collaborated with Ann Peterson, who Jean explained a lot about that when we looked at, the impact statement for the year. She's been doing a self-help practitioner workshop to talk about how to implement the promise that we put in place, the tenets of the promise. Let's unpack them and look at what they mean in real time and how to actually make that happen. And now she's putting together a summit, a Seek Safely Summit, to really talk about our broader mission. So at the moment, it's in development for November 16th. Do I have the date right? Okay. So it'll be a full day, and it'll be an online virtual event to help both people who want to be in the self-help space to understand what it looks like to practice ethically and safely, and how maybe you could do that and still make money. Like that would be like really good. And also for the person who's going to seek, what are the things you need to pay attention to, and what can you do for yourself to guarantee your own productive and effective growth journey, you know? So I think collaborating with her has been wonderful. I think for Jean, the collaborations that you've made with the cult organization has also been tremendous in terms of both extending our reach, teaching us something, and then working together with other people to really be able to address some of these real problems and do things to create some solutions.
Yeah.
So,
And oh, sorry. Go ahead, Glenn.
well, I was just going to say that something that occurs to me, kind of related to, Jenny, what you're describing, is the fact that a challenge that we have as an org have always faced is the fact that nobody thinks that they've got the bad guru. Like nobody thinks that, like nobody, just like nobody joins a cult, like nobody walks into an event or gets involved with a guru thinking like maybe I need to watch myself here. Like we all think we've got the good one. Like other people may need to watch out, but I've got the good one. I trust my guy.
I trust myself so much that regardless, I'll be fine.
Right? You bet. You bet. I'll see the red. It's fine. Like I'll figure it out. It's something worth noting, I think, that seeking safety, as we've kind of defined it and promote it and recommend it, it's not just a matter of tapping the brake on your personal development journey. Like that's not the point. Seeking safely actually makes your personal development journey not just safer, but more effective. Like you'll get more out of events, you'll get more out of materials and books and whatnot if you go into it looking through this lens. Like, so Spiritual Warrior was not a bad event just because people died and got hurt. It was a bad event for lots of reasons. And had the event been more effectively organized, more safely, more ethically organized, it would have been better for the participants on their journey, even had nobody died, right? So this is not just about kind of tapping the brake and reining it in, and it's not, what we're promoting is not a bummer. It's actually a tool to help you get more out of this, whatever guru or organization or tool you're using.
Absolutely.
Sure. Something else that I see as part of the enduring legacy of Sedona is, again, I talked at the beginning a little bit about how we often go back to it because it's such a good example of what can go wrong in the self-help industry. And one of the other things that we've talked about a lot that has changed over the last 15 years is that when we started, nobody really knew what we were talking about. People were like, okay, what's the problem here? It's really sad that people died, but like, what is the bigger problem? And in the last few years, we have had all of these stories come out about, different organizations, mostly kind of culty things. And, a little bit culty. The podcast has gotten really popular and they're doing great stuff over there. There's just a lot more awareness. And I think, Glenn, you were saying like, not a lot has changed in the industry, but I do think consumers are savvier than they used to be. Oh, yeah. I think consumers like kind of see through some of the BS a little more readily, because maybe just because there's so much of it, it's like, we're like training on all of this bad stuff we see to be able to recognize it. Yeah. But I think Seek was uniquely situated to be able to explain and put into context the significance of this learning that we've done about culty things, and to say, look, there's just another piece here that's really important for everyone to understand. Not all of the cults, but many, many of the cults, particularly the ones that aren't like specifically religious in nature, most of those cults they're advertising self-help. That's how they pull people in. It's, we're going to help you improve your relationships. We're going to help you improve your business. We're going to help you, self-optimize and make the most out of your life. That is what they are advertising, because nobody joins a cult. You can't say, hey, come join our cult. The cult has to put something out there in the front that is attractive to people. So we were uniquely able to understand that fact about the culty stuff and the self-help stuff, and to be that link for people to deepen their understanding. So people are fascinated by cults, but I think a lot of people think like, that's over there and that's never going to be me. But we've been able to, I think, explain how it could be you, actually. If you're the type of person who's looking for this type of stuff, like that's how you walk into those situations. So I think that's an important thing that we've been able to, some important context that we've been able to provide in this day and age when people have a lot more awareness, and I think a lot more empathy for the whole cult experience.
You bet.
Mm-hmm.
You bet.
Yeah.
Something that I think is really integral to both the legacy of Sedona, but also the legacy that is continually written by Seek, is that a problem that we quickly found, like as your family, and then we as an organization dug into the self-help world and really tried to publicize some of these issues, was that our culture was really quick on the draw with the victim blaming.
Mm-hmm.
So when you described that nobody really knew what we were talking about at first,
mm-hmm.
Yeah, nobody really knew what we were talking about, like kind of that culture of self-help products and services and events, even though it has a long history, it was not really mainstream. So one, people didn't know what we were talking about, but two, when they did find out what we were talking about, a lot of the attitude was like, well, okay, but they signed up for that. Like they took a risk. Come on. Like, sometimes risks don't, come on. It's right. And I think it's really important to push back against, look, I think this in a much broader way than just what we're talking about culturally, but I think it's really important to push back against that legacy of victim blaming, victim shaming and blaming.
Mm-hmm.
Because again, like I can't overstate the fact that, look, I've met survivors from Sedona. We Gene, you and I have talked to so many survivors of similar things. Invariably, we're talking smart, motivated people. This is not a matter of there is some sort of flaw in victim survivors that drew them toward dangerous situations like this. It's really important to point this out because a lot of times, if we're engaging in self-help at all, like Christine Whelan the other night was talking about how it used to be the case in the self-help section of the bookstore, like you wouldn't really make eye contact. You'd very quickly go in and then, furtively get your book. And there's still kind of that stigma of not only are you trying to improve yourself, what's wrong with you? But now you're paying tens of thousands of dollars to do this weird thing. Kind of what's wrong with you? Our culture is super quick on the draw with the victim shaming. And so I think one of our legacies that we continue to forge is really rejecting and reframing that narrative that there's something wrong or bad or flawed in people that draws them to experiences like this. It's actually quite the opposite. I think folks are drawn to experiences like this because of some of the best things inside them.
Yeah. I think it became obvious that when people had bad experiences, they were ashamed themselves, embarrassed, upset, and they just wanted to move on from it. They didn't want to talk about it. They didn't want to reveal it. Or if they really understood that what had happened to them was really wrong, and they tried to hold the person accountable, in many, many instances that we know of, they were paid off. They were paid off so that they couldn't talk. And then, we heard many stories that people couldn't share because part of the monetary agreement to keep their mouths shut was to keep their mouths shut. So it became really evident that it was very similar to what happened in, sexual misbehaviors, the Me Too movement. It became very evident to me that it was the same kind of thing.
Yeah.
That there were many, many people who had been harmed and were unable to admit and come forward and say, me too. So I think the Me Too movement has also impacted people's ability to say, no, wait a minute, something really bad happened.
Yeah.
We have a right to speak that. I have a right to say that. This isn't all my fault.
Yeah.
So I think that has made a difference, and just connecting with the people that we have, because I have to tell you, the first 10 years of doing this work has been so difficult, so hard, because, Gene and I would be writing and writing and writing and trying to put stuff out. And, the response was very small. And yet now it's interesting that people are finding us. Now that they're ready to look at there are problems, we're having people find us. And so I'm glad we've stuck around because I think now we're intersecting with, in a really great way in the larger culture to address this larger situation. But man,
It took a while.
It's a long haul, and I'm really.
It was a slog.
It's been a slog.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I think, what you're saying about the Me Too movement is part of that savvy consumerism, I think, that has developed where, Glenn, victim blaming, like people see it now and call it out. Whereas, 15 years ago,
they were not.
I don't think there was not as much awareness. And so for sure, I read the comments when I should not have read the comments, but I remember so many comments that I would read, like right after Sedona happened, where it was like, these stupid people, why didn't they just leave? Which is like the classic line of, people in an abusive relationship or a dodgy, situation. Why didn't they just leave?
We're at the trial.
Yeah. So yeah, I think again, like that has shifted a little bit among consumers so that people are able to understand when we explain, no, there was a reason that people were unable to leave. People were abused essentially over the course of 4 days before the so-called sweat lodge, to the point where they weren't able to make those choices. And then we could see, just like we talked about with Christine the other night, we can laugh about when you just see the formula. I can see the formula of self-help event and how it's all designed to weaken people and make them more suggestible so that, they buy the next event or they buy the next book.
Or they take the greater risk and don't pay attention to that inner voice that's saying, I don't know about this.
Yeah, something's wrong here. Or this is a red flag, but they don't really they don't really register it in the same way. Yeah.
And that point is so important that it's not that folks miss red flags. Like I've always been really resistant to framing things as like, well, there were red flags and I missed them, because I feel it's so much more complicated than that. I feel when somebody has a trauma history, I know when somebody has a trauma history, it's not that we're missing red flags because we lack diligence or we lack intelligence. Trauma has a tendency to make us colorblind to those flags.
Yeah, part of the conditioning within the trauma is telling you to ignore the flag or to see the flag as a positive.
As a green flag. Exactly. Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah. Which is exactly what James did in the sweat lodge. All of those markers of heat stroke were things that he was saying were good. We're part of people's breakthrough. We're part of the experience that they were supposed to have.
You bet.
Yeah.
You
Were
bet.
signs that they were being successful.
Yeah.
You bet.
That they were breaking through.
You bet. If folks follow my work, like you guys know that I bang on and on about the power of conditioning and programming and suggestion, and this is why, because we really need to get away from the idea that this is about intelligence or that this is about even strength. Like, oh, well, why weren't you strong enough to leave? Like, that has nothing to do with intelligence or strength. Conditioning cuts through all of that. And if you really look at what happened at Spiritual Warrior, it really was a matter of, I'm going to spend, multiple days conditioning you for this experience. And if you know what you're doing when it comes to influence and conditioning, again, intelligence and strength don't come into play. So I think it's one of the legacies of Sedona is like, it's super important that people understand the principles of influence and the principles of conditioning and kind of, like we kind of wrap it up as culty tactics, and they are culty tactics, but they're employed far more widely than in just high control religious groups, right?
Exactly.
Well, I love what you wrote, and it's in the website. I forget the title of the particular blog that you wrote, Jean, that some of the tactics that are used, especially sensory deprivation, are what's used when we torture people in order to get information.
Interrogating, yeah, exactly.
So the interrogation techniques that are used are the same things. It's pretty incredible.
Yeah.
So I think that's the other thing that's happened too. I think there's a greater understanding and more awareness of our own neuropsychology and how our brains work, and how that's conditioning and suggestibility actually happens before we're even consciously aware of what's really going on.
Exactly. Yeah. So when I've spoken at the cult conference, one of the things that I've said a couple times is a lot of the people who are there are talking about cult recovery and that kind of thing. And so I'm saying I'm here to talk about how can we prevent people from getting into these places to begin with. Is there a way that we can empower people before they've gotten into this situation? Because once they're in this conditioning, like you're saying, it's so powerful that they're kind of lost at that point, and there's not a whole lot you can do until they have their own experience that shakes them out of it somehow. But yeah, it's about, can we empower people before they encounter the problematic guru or the culty group, or the person who's just trying to get all their money. Yeah. I think one of the other things that I just wanted to point out, because we've had some comments on our Facebook, pointing out the cultural appropriation that happened at Sedona.
Yes. Oh my God, let's talk about that. Yes.
Let's
do a whole episode about that, actually.
Yeah, we will. But like that's something else that I'm grateful that I was able to understand as a result of this. And again, talking about the patterns that we see in self-help. Oh my God, it's just so frustrating. There's so much of it. There's so much appropriation. And what happens is, you take something that's good and something that's safe, the way that it is traditionally done, and then you do it in an unsafe way because your understanding or your training is very superficial.
Yes.
So one of the commenters says abuse is something that doesn't happen in a real hearing ceremony at the hands of Indigenous elders, nor does it cost anything. Right, as a criminal, a perpetrator as well. Yeah. And I appreciate that comment, and I appreciate that, that was something that I came to understand very quickly. And that I think, we didn't blame the sweat lodge. The sweat lodge wasn't the problem. So we didn't say we need to ban all sweat lodges. It was the fact that James Ray appropriated this tradition and then did it in a way that was completely, unsafe and inappropriate, and he wasn't qualified to do it. And he, broke so many of the kind of unsaid rules about a sweat lodge. And that's what put people in danger, not the fact that it was a sweat lodge itself.
Yeah, we were very aware of that really from the beginning, and actually had a lot of very, very positive contact with the indigenous people from the nations who were represented at the trial, and established some long friendships. So that's also been another thing that's been happening in terms of legacy, the connection of people to each other. The people that I have met as a result of Kirby's death is pretty incredible.
Mm-hmm.
It's ironic too that maybe it's ironic, maybe it's perfectly appropriate that of the many things that spiritual warrior in Sedona is kind of emblematic of, James Arthur Ray, of all the gurus, to culturally appropriate, like in this case, an indigenous ceremony and principles, and because the whole week was themed that way, like it was themed, like, because he was not just a sweat lodge, he sent people on a vision quest, right? Like, I mean, there's this whole thing, but James is a basic white guy from Oklahoma.
Mm-hmm.
He's a white guy who wears thumb rings. Come on. He was real. Part of his shtick was to claim that he was trained in not just indigenous practices, but like he had a whole shtick about how he had gone down to Peru and trained with the descendants of the Incas, and how he was a shaman in that culture, and he had a whole thing about how he was the only white man to ever become a huna in like the Hawaiian spiritual tradition. Like, if there can be a legacy from Sedona of really becoming aware of how teachers kind of really appropriate principles and histories and language from cultures that, again, they barely understand, because you see this everywhere. You see this in a lot of wellness spaces around particularly Asian principles and ideas and
yoga.
Right. So no, that's absolutely something that we need to pay attention to and publicize. If only we had an org and a podcast. We do, Jean.
Yes, we do. And so, speaking of which, because it is our fundraising week, I am just going to throw this up there. We do ask for donations. We are a donation-driven organization. So if you are able to donate, we are very grateful. We've got a few different places to donate on Facebook, on our website. And we are grateful to all of our supporters and sponsors. Our sponsors: Frank's Custom Shoe Fitting, Orange County Automotive, Stone and Magnanini, Complex Litigation, and all of our wonderful donors. I'll put their names up at the end here. But I'm very grateful to everyone. And thank you guys for joining me tonight, Dr. Glenn Patrick Doyle and Miss Ginny Brown.
We love the people that we meet through this org. So after this live stream, once again, you can head over to the Dr. Glenn Patrick Doyle page, and we'll do an after party live stream. But something that I really love. I mean, I love having a social media presence in the first place because of the people that I get connected to. Through it. You meet such interesting, cool, again, motivated, smart people who are really committed to, look, you're not following me unless you're really committed to understanding how recovery works. And you're not following us, Seek Safely, unless you're really committed to and interested in, kind of how this industry works and the process of personal empowerment. So thank y'all for even following our work. If you can throw a few dollars our way, we would love it. But what we would love most is, again, your attention and sharing our stuff, sharing our podcast, listening to our podcast. It makes such a difference.
Yeah. And I see you guys who have joined us every night, and I'm so grateful. It's been lovely to have you with us. There are a few people who I know and are commenting as well, which is appreciated too. So I can include your comments in here when we're talking.
So I think another way people can donate is just by helping to spread the message, direct people to the website, direct people to the different platforms that you guys are on, encourage them to buy the book, to, read the story and see what's behind it. They can get it on audio or they can get it through Amazon. But, encourage the continual spreading of this mission that we have, because that's the legacy. That's what we're going to leave behind, is the education and the improvement. So thank you for being a part of that, and please help us to be able to continue to do what we've started.
See, Mom, you're great at asking for money. What is this?
Look at Ginny making the pitch.
Look at you go.
Making the pitch. God bless.
I don't know. We can't do the work without any money. We need to hire. Thank you.
All right. Well, thank you all so much for being with us. And tomorrow night, it's the final night, the ultimate night of Seek Week. So we hope you will join us, same place, same time, and we will be talking about consumer empowerment.
We will go live on the Dr. Glenn Patrick Doyle page here in just a few minutes. So come on over for the after party.
Okay.
And we will see you there.
Thank you all. Good night.
Ciao.
Thanks, Glenn. Good.